Welcome back to Sweet Slow Sunday. I'm Jess, and thank you so much for joining me here in this space and taking the time out of your day to be here and to be here not for me, but for yourself. So, again, before we start, I like to start by calling ourselves back to our bodies, back to our breath, back to our hearts. And we can do that by anchoring ourselves in with a deep breath. And we can also do that by touching our heart space or sending a conscious thought of awareness to the space of our hearts. And using this moment to notice what's happening within us and to notice what's happening around us without judgment and only with observation. So that always prepares us really well to get present and to get grounded and to make space to experience poetry, to open ourselves up to listening, to being present with the words, with the language, with the musicality that happens within the language. And so today I'm going to read some more Joy Harjo. And again, this is from the collection How We Became Human. This is one of my favorite collections, and I just love these poems so much. So I will probably be reading a lot of Joy Harjo during our time together. This piece is called Reconciliation, a Prayer. 1. We gather at the shore of all knowledge as peoples who were put here by a God who wanted relatives. This God was lonely for touch and imagined herself as a woman, with children to suckle, to sing with, to continue the web of the terrifyingly beautiful cosmos of her womb. This God became a father who wished for others to walk beside him in the belly of creation. This God laughed and cried with us as a sister at the sweet tragedy of our predicament, foolish humans. Or built a fire as our brother to keep us warm. This God who grew to love us became our lover, sharing tables of food enough for everyone in this whole world. 2. Oh, sun, moon, stars, our other relatives peering at us from the inside of God's house, walk with us as we climb into the next century, naked but for the stories we have of each other. Keep us from giving up in this land of nightmares, which is also the land of miracles. We sing our song, which we've been promised has no beginning or end. 3. All acts of kindness are lights in the war for justice. 4. We gather up these strands broken from the web of life. They shiver with our love as we call them the names of our relatives and carry them to our home made of the 4 directions and sing. Of the South, where we feasted and were given new clothes. Of the West, where we gave up the best of us to the stars as food for the battle. Of the North, where we cried because we were forsaken by our dreams. Of the East, because return to us is the spirit of all that we love. And this next piece, also by Joy Harjo, is called The Creation Story. I am not afraid of love or its consequence of light. It's not easy to say this or anything when my entrails dangle between paradise and fear. I am ashamed. I never had the words to carry a friend from her death to the stars correctly, or the words to keep my people safe from drought or gunshot. The stars who were created by words are circling over this house formed of calcium, of blood. This house in danger of being torn apart by stones of fear, If these words can do anything, if these songs can do anything, I say, bless this house with stars, transfix us with love. I love those pieces. I love those pieces so much. And again, just let these pieces land with you where they land. Okay, so moving onward, I want to talk about truth. It's a really big thing to talk about, but I want to talk about truth because when we're talking about poetry, when we're talking about expression, and, beyond the slowing down, because yes, poetry demands our presence and it demands us to slow down. And what happens within that slowdown is what we begin to notice, happening all around us, and not just around us, but happening within us. And then what happens from there is that we begin to form these bridges between the internal wilderness, the internal world, and the external wilderness or world. So this is important because we hear a lot of talk about truth, right? Like speaking our truth, living our truth, being in our truth, expressing our truth, the right to truth, the right to be able to articulate our truth and to stand inside of it and to embody it. And all of these things are absolutely beautiful. And I believe that they are absolutely essential to community and to really living in full color and vibrancy. But it's really there's a line there. I feel like there's a line here where sometimes we get so attached to our truth that we begin to believe that ours is the only truth. And so I wanted to share this little diagram because this is how I have come to understand truth, especially when it comes to self-expression on the page, poetry, and whether I'm reading it or listening to it or writing it myself and sitting in circle with others who are sharing their truths and their expressions and what it is that they're observing in their lives. This is how I've come to understand it. So I'm going to share this little diagram that I drew. And under here, of course, it says truth. But I always like to think of truth as like capital T truth and truth lowercase or little t truth. And so the capital T truth represents the totality of all perception, the totality of what we all see when we weave each strand of perception together. And so we have the big T, right? And inside of the big T are all of these many, 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 many little T's. And those little T's represent a strand of perception, right? Not the totality, but just one strand or one facet or one way of perceiving and one understanding or translation of perception. And that little T is represented, or it represents the perception of an individual, the perception of someone who is making an observation and sharing it or expressing it or embodying it. And we each have our perception, and that is our superpower, is that we can look out into the world, we can notice what we're noticing, and we don't have to turn away from any of it. And that's the beautiful aspect of poetry. Is poetry doesn't ask us to like turn our eyes away from something because we're afraid of what would happen if we were to open up to it. Poetry asks us to be here and present inside of all of it. And so what happens is when we are, we each have this opportunity to perceive what is happening around us and to tell our story about what it is that we are seeing. And, we can paint an observation as good or bad, or neither good or bad, or just as what is. And that's our power. That's our power, because as soon as we shift our perception, we shift the way that we are in a relationship to what it is that we're perceiving. And I think it's really important that when we're talking about poetry, or we're talking about truth, or we're talking about, how it all fits into the greater totality of all that is that your expression, your ability to see the poetry happening all around you and within you, and how you're connecting to all of it, is essential in understanding, in allowing all of us to have a greater understanding of the totality, that big T truth, because we are weaving myth. That is what we are doing in real time. We are constantly weaving myth with what it is that we're perceiving, with the stories that we're telling about our lives, with the stories that we're telling about our connections, and the way that we are in relationship with anyone and anything. And this is just a little reminder to embrace that, to embrace your truth, and to also do our best to meet another with the understanding that while we have the right to our perception, while we have the right to our expression of what it is that we're perceiving and the way that we choose to tell the story of our observation, that other people and the people around us also have the same opportunity and the same allowance of expression, and the same allowance of being within their own perception of their own experiences. And this is how we begin to make room at the table, right? This is how we begin to enter into the space of sacred witness. And when we share what our truth is, what our little T truth is, based on our own experiences and our relationship to those experiences, we make room to witness another in their perception and their experiences and their telling of those experiences. And that is also poetry, because without that, we don't have a varying degree of storytelling. We don't have that without the act of witness, without trying to manipulate or change another's truth. And it's all important. It's all contributing to the greater T truth. And the more facets we have, the more prism, the more color we have in the world, in terms of the story that we're telling together, and the story that we're creating together, and this grand web that we're weaving and creating in real time. So just wanted to share that and encourage you and empower you to, continue noticing and being within your own experience as fully and alive as possible. Notice the texture of your life and capture it on the page if you can. Capture it, because it is so important, whether you share it with the world, or you share it with one person, or you're just witnessing yourself in that act. That is really essential to truth and to being here on purpose and slow and intentional. So that's what I have for you this week. And I will see you again next Sunday for Sweet Slow Sunday. Peace.